comments you ask will be answered. Okay, all right, let's get going then. So this is an acrylic demonstration of capturing the autumn colours out in the landscape. As you can see by all the layers, painting outside in the autumn is a little hardy for those who want to go out, but the benefits are enormous. Now, I'm afraid I made a slight mistake. We had planned to do this last weekend for Halloween, but a big storm rolled in, so we couldn't do it then. And I forgot the clocks changed, so we're even 1 hour later in the evening. So the lovely light that floods through here, we haven't really got a light day today. Let's hope it comes out in the next little while, but we are actually a little further on into the day than I had intended. But anyway, there we go. We have some people watching from America at 7 a.m. So if we'd gone an hour earlier, they'd have had to get up at 6 a.m., which is a bit cruel. So anyway, here we go. So this is acrylics. Now, acrylics are a plastic sort of paint. And what we do is we use a medium. It's called Acrylic Medium. This is a gloss medium. And what I do is I put it with the paint, a good amount. This paint already has some on it. And you see it looks white when it comes out, but it dries completely transparent. So don't worry about how it looks when it comes out. Put a good amount out there because that will make the paint creamy for you. Okay. Now we're going to start by drawing. And if we're drawing, then we actually want to dilute the paint.
Everything's good and live.
Everything's good and live. Okay, my son's come to tell me we're all good. So I'll keep going. So when we're drawing, all we're going to do is establish the main shapes. So we, in the Irish School of Landscape Painting, made a 4-stage method, which was a combination of my dad's brilliant painting, no other word for it, Kenneth Webb, and my mother's scientific background. I'm also a little bit scientific and analytical, so we have 4 clear steps for you to follow. So the first stage is to select and to draw in the composition. Now obviously I have already selected where exactly to put this canvas, where exactly to sit, and exactly what I'm going to put in. So I'm going to take from to the left of that very big tree there. These trees are really special trees, and if somebody who knows Mount Usher Gardens likes to give us a shout, you can tell us exactly what these trees are and all about them, because I'm no botanist. All I do is paint. So, but this lovely big tree across to the golden tree over there is my view with the weir. So let's go about putting it in. So having decided on my view, now this is watered down paint. So water dissolves acrylic. It's the solvent that dissolves it. Now I'm just going to stand up. I'm sure Matt Donovan's going to shout at me for this, but I'm going to stand up for a few minutes because I can't actually see down in to get the whole view if I'm sitting, because the canvas is partly in the way. But I'll sit for the rest of the demonstration. Now, the first thing for me to do is to mark in my main trees. So that's a question of experience, it's a question of guessing. It's a guesstimate to begin with. If you're a bit experienced, your guesses are more likely to be right, but it's guess. So make a mark, and if it goes wrong, you just take a damp tissue and you can wipe it out. So let me see. I think we'll go for that big tree there. And this one here. Now I'm trying to angle them a bit so they're not like sticks sticking up. So see, the bottom of that is further away from the canvas than the top. So it's making a triangle. And then the next biggest fir is behind this golden tree. So I might angle him a bit that way. Okay, and then we got the weir itself. We need to mark where the water is coming. I might sit for that to be a bit steadier. Do you see if I sit all I have to do, my hips are supported, all I have to do is swivel my hips and keep my brush at the same level, and all I have to do then is to swivel like that, and you get a straight line, more or less. Now it dips down where it goes over the weir, so let's dip it down a bit. And I might just, well, I suppose that's good enough. There's always the temptation to fiddle with it. You want to get your main shapes in and not fiddle too much, but you do want to check the line is straight. You see, by taking a definite measurement, tucking your finger underneath the canvas and keeping your brush steady, then you can check that it's a straight line. Now the next thing is to decide on the angle of the weir. So all I'm doing is putting a few straight lines in. If you can draw a straight line, have a go. And if you can't draw a straight line, use a ruler. So, okay. Now, I have to decide what angle this weir is going to come at, and I'm just going to do it with a straight line to begin with. Now that straight line means I'm going to do another straight line, because actually I think I'm going to include that gate over there. As soon as you start working on a picture, things evolve. So I'm going to include this little gate, which is just over to my side, which I hope you can see. But I'm going to get these trees in the background in first, just so that I get a feel for what's happening. I didn't really mean to pick up red; it just happened to be red in the palette. Now, when we decided to do this demonstration, and came and talked to Catherine and Conrad. Catherine and Conrad J. They own the. I'm in the private part of the gardens, and it's there. So they very kindly allowed me to set up here for the day. And that tree was absolutely glorious. But of course, along came the storm last weekend, so it's not quite as gorgeous now. So I might put a few more leaves on it than there really are. So I'm just marking in this next tree, which has also lost a good few leaves. It had red tinges to it, red berries or red tinges anyway. So now, let's get the path in. So, we want a path. We want a path. So do you see what I'm doing? All I'm doing is building up geometric shapes. So those who've been following our regular Tuesday morning live stream and looking at Suzanne with me, do you see we have rectangle, 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 hopefully all different sizes. I'll measure them in a moment. Triangle, let's break this triangle up again. We're going to have the bottom of the weir. In fact, the weir, now that we've got the line on it, we could give it the little curve that it has. Do you see it has it? Don't see, but there's a curve to it. There's a very nice flow to it. So we're sitting in Mount Usher Gardens, which are a very, very famous Robinsonian garden, which is a style of gardening where they work with nature and have it as sort of wild and garden at the same time. And these gardens could have been lost to us in 1979 when the gardens were up for sale. The Walpoles, who'd been here for a long time, were selling. But fortunately, along came Madeline J., the mother of the current owner, Conrad, and she thankfully purchased it and really worked for it for the rest of her life. So we are very grateful to her. She was always here when I'd often bring my classes here to paint, and she'd always be there in the morning taking her morning constitutional. Always happy to talk. She's passed on now. She was 94 when she went, but she was a great lady. Okay, now, so these are the red flowers. Again, I don't know what they are, but they're quite delightful up against the dark reflections. And this is the line of the wall. And now we want to put in a gate. So we don't want it to be too high up. So if I want to know where that gate comes in alignment with the landscape, what I do is, maybe you can't see if I go off screen, I take my brush as a horizontal line, lay it on top of the gate, and then see what part of the landscape it bisects. So it comes, actually, surprisingly enough, just above the water. And I'm not sure, I think I might want that water to be a bit bigger. Just a tiny bit taller, I think. So I'm not worrying about whether my drawing is neat or pretty. All it is an underlying structure for the rest of my painting. That's its function. Now, actually, I don't need to have it over here because the trees are covering over that. So you see how you can rub it out perfectly successfully. Just dip your tissue into water, and if you've got your clothes underneath it, move them out of the way. Oops. Extra jumpers there. Don't want them wet. Okay. Now, I think I'll tame down this, this bush so it tucks into the corner. So you see how I'm adjusting the composition as I go. So that will allow this big tree here to reflect down into the water. That would be rather nice to have the golden reflections going down into the water. Not that you see a lot of water there. And on up we go. This skeleton structure of the branches is rather nice up at the top here. I'm just going to cool off for a few minutes. My hat will cool me down. Okay, now as we look across the other side of the gate, it's the, for those who know Mount Usher, it's the pond area. No? And in the pond area, we don't see the pond, but we can see through to the beautiful maple drive, which we're not painting today. Another day. Now, let's see, we want the other side of this path to come in. Now, that comes more or less towards us, but don't worry about perspective. If you're following along with this and you don't know about perspective, all you have to do is put a triangle in the corner there. See how easy that is? Just a triangle. I put a little wiggle on my triangle. You don't have to wiggle it if you don't want to, but if you wiggle it, then it makes it easy to put in the pathway that people walk around the pond on the other side here, which is just another triangle and another smaller triangle, and now you've got the curving perspective. So all you need to be able to do in order to get perspective, if you're working from something that I'm doing, is to be able to draw a rectangle, a triangle, and either a circle or curved forms, and to know whether you want to put them in big or small. And that's about it, really. It's not that hard. Okay, now, so we've got those big trees in. Let me just check their distances, because we want them not to be the same. So I'm checking the distance at the bottom and the distance at the top. So they are different. That is good. And let's see that these are different. Okay, so all the spacings need to be different. Okay. Now I'm going to stand up again because I can see the background better in relation. So there's a minor tree back here. There's actually a little house back there, and this cuts through the house. Probably isn't very obvious on camera. It's amazing how different things look when you're standing on the site. They really do. Now that tree is quite close to the first one. That's the other big pine. And then this is a big hidden tree in behind. And I'm making sure that of these trees, I get them at different spacings. Now we've got some nice branches coming across here, which I'm putting in because they're an important part of the picture. Parallel to the first one. And then there's a small tree beside it. Okay. All right. So now this big fir tree has some nice branches that come across and makes a nice triangular shape. And here we've got, do you see the wall that goes up the other side of the river? Basically, it's one long big triangle, isn't it? One long big triangle. And it finishes just after that tree. So you see how you can mark it out and keep everything in relation to one another. And I might make that just a little bit smaller because I don't want to run out of space for my trees, all that's going on in the back there. Okay, I think that's a more pleasing shape. Now, there's a bit of a hill here, a little bit of a hill, and some rather nice shapes in the greenery here. Oh, where those people are walking, you can see the path goes there. It's rather nice having a person in there. And there's a greeny tree. Greeny tree in there. And a little bit of a house in here. Very hidden. We're not going to make anything very much of it. And some lovely creepy looking branches going on in there. Okay. Now then, I think we're ready to paint. So, stage one complete. Obviously, if I was doing this for myself, I would, and I take a long time over painting pictures. So, having just studied Cézanne, I can tell you that he would take 100 or 150 hours over a picture. I'm not doing that today. We've got 2 hours. So I want to show you some, more than tips, some structured technique for achieving an acrylic painting and not being afraid to go outside, to experience the colours outside. You know, if I took a photograph of this, or if you look at it through the video camera, you can probably hardly see that house, which is very clear to me. You get a whole different feeling. You get a feeling of the space that there is there, the air that there is between this foreground and the background. It's different to taking photographs. So more on that in a moment. Let's show you it. Now, because this is acrylics, acrylics will dry hard. So if you have a brush and you're going to put it down, you at minimum are going to leave it in the water. But I like my brushes, so I clean them off properly when I finish using them. So I just have most of the water off shot because the electrics are all down on that side, and I don't want to tip them with my arm into the electrics, or it might be a very short stream indeed. Okay, so and when I clean my brush, I re-point it, make sure it's just plain water, but I just make sure that it's looked after. Okay, so I'm going now onto a big brush and a palette knife. What's the palette knife for, you may ask? Well, for mixing. Now I can see the sun just over there. It should be just over there had I got my timing right, not forgotten about the clocks going back when a storm came in. So because it's over there, the sky is actually a little bit mauvey. So this is a mixture of monestial blue or phthalo blue, which is a cold blue, and prism violet, and ultramarine blue, and white. This is the... Now, it's been sitting out here for a little while because it takes a while to coordinate getting all the cameras and everything ready. I've mixed it already with medium, but you see I remix it with a bit of medium, so it's really nice and creamy. And I put my knife into the water so the acrylic doesn't dry hard on it. Now, big brush. I have a tissue at the ready in case I want to wipe something off. Oh, I forgot to put these background trees in. Oh well. It doesn't matter because I have the main shapes in. Now, actually, that sun is sinking, and I think we're going to not get the light that I had wanted. So I am do you see what's happening? As I'm sitting here, I'm being really influenced by the sky that's there, that's drawing towards the evening. And in fact, I think that probably you would rather see a bright, cheery, sunny picture. So I'm going to draw from my memory and from my experience of being on the site here. And I know that the light goes through the background, and I'm just washing that brush off. And I'm going to instead skip ahead to putting the yellows in. I wouldn't normally do this, but when you're working on the site, you really have to be flexible with what is thrown at you. And I think we want to have the plan there of light coming through. So here we go. Lost my other knife. Lost it. Oh well, use this knife. It's my special knife because it's a little finer. So I'm just going to mix up a little bit of, oh that's red, lemon and white. Here we go. Donovan or Matthew, you might tell me, is this second palette on camera? Is the yellow palette on camera? I don't know that is. So anyway, I've put it over here so that you can see. So that's just lemon and white, a bit of ochre maybe through it as well. And I'm just going to bring that through the background, just where the light comes. So that will make up for me not drawing them in. I'm putting them in with blocks instead. So I'm just varying it between lemon, adding a little bit of ochre with it, because this yellow one is visible as well. Okay, fantastic. Good. Okay, so as we come a bit closer to us, I'm using a bit more of the yellow ochre, which is a little bit denser. Do you see it's slightly denser? Again, it doesn't take a great skill to do this, does it? It's just knowing where to put the paint. So there you are, lemon straight from the tube, and some ochre straight from the tube, and here's a little bit of a mix with white as well. So we're taking the light through the background. Easy, easy, easy. Oh, I went over the house. Oh well. Good old tissue. Let's keep a bit of the house in. Okay. So I only discovered recently that that Catherine, Conrad's wife, actually runs a Airbnb from here, which is amazing. So you get to stay in the private house here, right in the center of these amazing gardens, which means you really get to know the place at all times of the day. And there's just endless material here to paint, endless, at all times of year. I've already picked out a view that I could do in the winter from here. Just behind me. But you know, whatever the season, you always find wonderful material. So here's this glorious yellowy orange tree. I have put more leaves on it than there are at the moment. I can bring some blue through it. So that's cadmium orange with the yellow ochre and a touch of the touch of the lemon. Okay, and then I think we'll even have a touch of the red with the yellow ochre for this tree here. And wash some of that off. And then the light hits onto the top of the wall here as well. Yep, that's as I remember it. Now, I want to go on to blue, so I definitely want to clean up the brushes. There we go. Now, back to what I was doing with the sky. But see, now that I've got those yellows in, do you see there's the impetus to have it not quite so grey? So I'm going to go back to my knife. And mix up a little bit of slightly brighter blue. Remember the monestial blue I was talking about? Just to have a little tinge of that as well. Okay, you could throw those two dirty waters for me under the dead tree, and fill them up if you would. My son should know by now. If he comes near me, he gets a job. Well, while I'm streaming. Okay, here we go. So don't worry about the little bit of blue mixing with a little bit of yellow. Because we're using thicker paint and it's mixed nicely with the medium, do you see how it just glides on? Nothing's any bother to it. If it becomes a bother, then you just go back to clean your brush and make sure you've got clean paint in the palette. So this is a background anyway for us to put our foliage over. Now I'm using not too thick paint because I'm being cognizant of the fact that because we don't have sunshine on us and because it's later in the year, actually the acrylic may not dry very well. Usually you can work very quickly with the acrylic because you have the advantage of it drying quickly.
Where do you want me to put the water?
Under that dead tree, if you don't mind, and then there's fresh water. In the undergrowth, you don't put it...
You mean next to the big tree?
Yeah, the big tree, the dead one, the lovely tree. There was a gorgeous tree here. Oh, for years I painted it. Unfortunately, it's just a big tree stump now. Miss the trees when you're used to seeing them there. Okay, so do you see how I'm not paying any attention to modelling? What I'm paying attention to is, sweetheart?
I'll get that.
Okay. What we're paying attention to is just blocking in the main shapes. So again, nothing hard in doing that, is there? If you're struggling to get the paint onto the canvas, what you do is you go back to your canvas, back to your palette, and make the paint creamy. Clean up your brush, make the paint creamy, and then go back onto the canvas again. It shouldn't be a fight between you and the canvas. So here, as we're away from the sun, slightly going down over there, which is more mauve. So over there, it's more of the cold blue, the monestial blue. Just dealing with the water. You need to chuck it underneath the old tree there so it doesn't stain, and then fill it with fresh water. Thank you. Okay, now the only tricky thing about this path will be mixing the colour. So I'm going to do the water first. Clear a bit of space on the palette. Okay, so we're going to take some more of the monestial blue and white, in with a bit of the cobalt blue, and here we go, the water. Not worrying about taking the blue all the way back, because if you look at the water, it actually isn't blue back there, is it? Because you've got all of the reflections back there, so it isn't blue. Okay, now we take slightly darker blue, so that's the ultramarine blue for over here. Right, now, next we're going to do the path. Okay, so we've got this slightly mauvey blue as a base. Now the colour that I would really like is light red, which I don't think I have. Light red's a terribly useful colour, terracotta sort of colour. So instead we'll have to use a little bit of burnt sienna and a bit of yellow ochre. The reason I prefer the light red is because it's a lighter brown, as is implied by its name. It's not as heavy. So the path here, which is tar macadam, it would be very easy to make it very cold, but then you'd have a cold, dark strip at the bottom. So if you look into it, there's actually warm bits as well. So I tend to make my paths a little bit warm. There's still blue in it, but you can see that it's a little bit warm. Right. So one other little trick. Normally I would lift this up and paint underneath the feet so that we don't end up with little white marks there. But because the light is further round, because of the change in the clocks, and the sun's over there, if it were full sun, it would shine through the canvas, and it would have made it very difficult for you to see what you were doing. It would make it difficult for me to see what I was doing. So what we did was we taped boards and things to the back of the canvas. What I would do if I was out on the site is put my coat around the back, or keep in your car a piece of cloth for that purpose, because you never know when the sun, you don't know what angle you're going to take, and you don't know if the sun is going to decide that it's moving in that direction, and you don't want to be fighting to see what you're painting. So these are all useful things to do on the site. Now, for the wall here, I'm adding a little bit of blue and red, purple. And there's some nice stones in this wall, as well as greens. Okay, now, next we put in the greens. Okay, so clean the brush off again. You can hear I don't hold back when I clean my brushes. You can swill it around quite vigorously in the water, and the water cleans it pretty thoroughly. Okay, now then, green. So, this is olive green, and this is Minestrone blue. I'm mixing the two together on the end of the brush because the paint is quite creamy. And we're going to start putting in some of these dark greens. So, I'm going to start with the very background tree. So he's just going to sit into the back. So I want to let, as there is there in nature, I want to let the light come through. And all I'm doing is taking the paint and tipping it on with fairly generous paint, tipping it on in little comma-like strokes. Very impressionist. That's the sort of stroke they like to use, although a little bit finer. And the fact that we've got the blue and yellow behind matters not a jot. So, in fact, it's quite nice to have bits of it coming through. Now, for the next tree, more olive green and a little bit of purple. So if you want to, if you have any questions, just write into the chat box and the question will be relayed to me. So the purpose of this outdoor painting trip is to gather information, is to capture these colours on the canvas. It is a tricky thing to do with watercolour. You've got to get the timing right to have the colour there. You've got to have the weather right, and you may find it chilly to sit for hours. The damp can get into the bones a bit. But it is entirely worth it, because the freshness with which the freshness with which I paint on site is not something that I would be able to do from a photograph. If I were working from a photograph, I would become. Now I'm using a little bit of alizarin crimson in with the olive green. Might even use a tiny bit of sap as well. What was I saying? Yeah, there's no way I would get this freshness from a photograph. So the way that we work in the school, we're very much a plein air school when the weather is good. I do appreciate that not everybody wants to come out on the site in the winter, so we run the classes in the winter indoors with a few outdoor trips for the hardy. But this, what I'm doing now of that tree, I wouldn't do from the photograph, because I get caught up in the minute detail of exactly where this branch goes and where that branch goes, instead of seeing the big picture, instead of getting the feel of it. Because the photograph, whilst it may be awe-inspiring and incredibly beautiful, doesn't give you that feel of space, of sitting here, of being here. And while I'm sitting here looking at this, I'm subconsciously absorbing it. So when I take my sketch, even if my sketch is rough, my sketch for me has the quality of being here imbued in it. And it gives a life to the finished picture that I simply couldn't do entirely from photographs. Now, photographs are a great visual aid. They're a great reminder of what's on site. And when allied with your memory, can be a wonderful tool. So if you really don't want to work on the site because you really can't manage with the cold, or it's somewhere where you can't work on the site, you don't get permission to be there, or it's not safe, it's standing in the middle of the road. There's often good views in the middle of the road. Don't recommend painting in the middle of the road. But even if you're able to make a drawing, so you have some visual reference that you bring back from the site, it's not only that you have the reference, it's the fact that you spent the time there looking at the shapes and analysing the site. It gets into your skin if you spend some time on the site. And you get to know the view. You just get to know it. And it shows, for me. So that's why I take the trouble to go out on the site. We have to say a big thank you to Donovan, because he had to come home. He had to completely dismantle our streaming setup for the studio, which is going to need to be set up again for the Tuesday morning class, to bring it all out here. So thank you, Donovan. Now, here I am. This is a permanent green light. So I'm just now filling in those bushes. Some people do better at drawing or painting if they see things as a block. So I'm looking at this as a block that's basically a little rectangle or a four-sided figure. And then I only have to think, is this four-sided figure light or dark, warm or cold, and in it goes. So some people do better with seeing it as blocks, some people do better by following the line and make beautiful shapes with an outline. Now then, so by and large I'm blocking in the bigger areas first. Can you see that? I'm going to do this tree next because it's sitting up there and I got the right colours. But you see I left out a bit of the sky. Fortunately I've got a bit of colour on the palette that's almost the right colour to fill it in. Because that's actually a bit of sky between the leaves, and it's rather nice. So I don't mind which way I do it, whether I paint it in with a block or paint it in with line. Each way is just as good as the other, just two different ways of doing it. Just while I've got the blue on the brush, it's rather nice to just bring a few little bits of sky through these bushes, because they are losing their leaves now. Okay, now we were doing the trees. So this tree is more to the side of the picture. So I'm using a bit of emerald green and a bit of monestial blue in with the olive green. That's actually a little bit too cold, so I'm taking some raw sienna, putting that in with it. That's better. So without being perfectly exact, I'm getting the feeling of these droopy branches, which I'm sure are terribly characteristic of the type of tree that it is. People come from all over the world to visit these gardens. Maybe if we do another stream from here, I'll look up what kind of trees they are if people are interested. I just love the shapes and colours. That does fine for me. So you may wonder, how am I getting different colours without going back to the palette? So what I'm doing is I'm pushing either lightly or strongly. You see, I've got this cold green on the tip of the brush, and down here I've still got some of the other green. So if I push on the brush, then I get back to the dark green. And if I am light with the brush, I get some of the colder green. No, if we were doing a Tuesday morning class and we were doing things step by step, I'd go at a slightly slower pace, but plainly you don't, we're not going to have the opportunity to sit here for hours because it'll get dark, but plainly this is just what I do when I go out to get the information from the site. So I'm used to working fairly quickly because as a landscape painter, it's a skill that you end up developing because, well, at least a landscape painter in Ireland, of course the Impressionists were loved to be out in the south of France or in climates where you didn't have such variable weather. That's some yellow ochre there for those leaves which are really turned. So here in Ireland we have to be a little quick on our feet to get the landscape in. Now, I'm going back to the violet, that's prism violet. Rather nice colour, it's my last bit of it. And a bit of emerald green, lemon, more of the emerald. Have I lost the house again? Oh well, I'm painting the landscape there. The house is just there. You could tip that water please and give me some more. Okay, so I'm just, you see I've marked in several different rolling layers of the ground in the back there. And I'm just looking, sometimes I squint my eyes up, which isn't just because my eyesight is not 20/20 anymore. It's also that if you reduce the amount of light coming into your eye by squinting, then the colour becomes less dominant and the tone is more easily perceived. You can try that if you like. Try it by squinting. Try it in the evening time before you turn the lights on. If you've got a painting in the room, you'll see that if it's got good tone, it'll still look good as the light fades. But if the tone isn't very good, it'll tend to lose its tone. So I can see, you see that part of the landscape there, it's in underneath the bushes. It's got bits of soil and bits of red and so on in there, which eventually will go in. But the bits of soil, the bits of red, the turning bracken, all of that is they're small shapes. So I'm not going to worry about putting those in for the moment. Big shapes first. Now, all right, the next big thing is this, basically it's a wall behind, isn't it? So I'm going to keep my green brush for the moment, just to save on the water, because poor Matthew doesn't want to keep coming up here to change the water. Okay, so we've got ultramarine blue and we've got burnt sienna. And it's mixed on top of that slightly bluey grey that we already have. Now let's see, that might be too dark, but I don't mind a little bit of good dark. I don't want too dark. So I'm going to my grey of the path now on the same brush. See, some nice stonework visible over there, just as the weir turns over. So I'm varying it, warm and cold. How do I vary it? Well, if you look at the palette there, you'll see here it's more yellowy, here it's more blue. So where I want it lighter, I take from the more yellowy bit. Where I want it darker, I take from the more blue bit. There's a path that goes up there. You will see people walk on it perhaps. Now, where I want it darker, back to the dark again. Darker on the edge tends to hold your eye into the picture. Anyway, it's dark underneath the foliage that's there. Also, it'll be dark where the water splashes all the time. It'll be darker right at the bottom. And over here, basically I'm going to put foliage over it. So I don't want to make it slippery, but I also don't want bits of white showing through, so just give it a very light tickle of the paint. Now then, we've got the darks that I need to put through the weir, the whole of the river here. So that's a lot of dark. Now, let's take some ultramarine blue, bit of alizarin crimson, and back into this same pool of paint where I've been mixing all the darks for the background. Now let's see what we can do with that. So we'll get one dark line going along, and I'll have a dark line for the weir. Now, had I done this for myself, I'd have spent an hour or two drawing it and I'd have the exact shape of the weir. I don't, but I don't at the moment, but I'm going to look. Now you see there's a lovely curve in the middle of it, which really gives shape to the water as it comes over the weir. Okay, now that's just more of the green. Now, here we want more of this green, don't we? A little bit of the medium is quite useful to help it to slip across the surface. So do you see that the blue is in one distinct patch on the water there? And I'm keeping that. And do you know, there's a heron that often flies, he already did, flew up here. So the heron flying up the middle of the river is coming in before this picture is done. But not today, unless we see him. And I'm quick on the mark. Which might happen, you never know. The beauty of working on the site. Okay, now we've got all of these main areas in. We've still got small areas back here that we need to fill in. So it's just a question of filling those in. for the moment, and then we'll show you the next stage. Okay, so this we call the blocking in stage, because all I'm doing is I'm blocking each area in. Each area in its basic tone and colour. Giving the brush a go clean again. And more tissue. Okay. Sometimes to clean off my brush I might shake it like that, but I wouldn't do this in Conrad and Catherine's garden because they'll have spots of paint around. That wouldn't be nice. Okay, now before I fill those in, I see that I would like to be a little bit more precise with my yellow shapes. Remember the yellow shapes that I was putting through the background here? Because as I build this up, so the shapes become more refined, so the tone comes more refined, so the color comes more refined. Suzanne would say that you can't paint without drawing, that the whole process of painting is that the color and the line is so closely allied that the one begets the other. If you ever get a chance to look up Madeline J on Mount Usher Gardens, it's a fascinating story. Not just the way that she saved the gardens, but also, well, the bit that I relate to. She's so, she was a very strong lady, but one of her absolute loves was horses. And she had this incredible talent that she had an almost spiritual connection with each and every horse that she owned. And she started at a really early age. She was 4 years old, and her sister was taken to riding lessons who was 7. And there she is 4, and the sister's getting all the attention and getting on the horse and being paraded about, and she's just silently crying. And somebody notices and asks her what's wrong, and she said, "It's not fair. I want to ride." So her mother, Julie, got her, not one to do things by halves either, she got her a cob, big cob, for a 4-year-old. So she goes up and gets on the cob, and she's up there with a stable lad leading her around. And she notices that her sister has control over her horse, and you know, she's riding on her own independently. The horse just walking, nobody holding onto the horse. So she thinks that, well, good for my sister, it's good for me. So she clicks on a horse and kicks on the horse, and it's such a surprise for the poor old cob that he leaps forward, which is such a surprise for the poor stable lad holding him that he drops it, and off she goes cantering round the ring, happy as can be. She was competing professionally, on an international stage anyway, maybe not professionally, but at 12, and she was international at 17, and won all sorts of things in the next 20 years. By the time I knew her, she wasn't riding anymore. She was a lovely older lady. So now I'm just putting in a bit more colour onto this tree in the back here. So it's a mixture of cadmium yellow and cadmium orange. I'm following with the flow of the tree that's there. I'm not necessarily keeping exactly to what's to the arrangement there, because I'm putting in a few more leaves. I'm sorry that we missed when it was really full of leaves, so I'm putting in a few more leaves. And but at the same time, I'm being cognizant that it is the fall or autumn and the leaves are falling. So I'm also refining the shape, getting in the feel of the tree, but also putting in a few of the background colours just to break through. So once Madeline came here, the love of the garden, I think, probably took over from the love, well, I'm sure she never lost the love of the horses, but she focused on the garden. Of course, with the help of wonderful gardeners, but she was very hands-on for a very long time. So you see, as I go, I'm keeping with shape, looking all the time at the shapes that I'm putting in, but I'm also now putting in more form and almost drawing with the colour. Very different way of drawing though than you would from a photograph. It's drawing from the essence of the thing down to the detail of the thing instead of starting with the detail and trying to capture the essence. So this tree here, I remember, had red bits on the edge. So we're going to get some of those red bits. So it's cadmium red with a little bit of the cobalt violet in with it. Sorry, it's prism violet. It's a close colour to cobalt violet, which I would use in the oils, but it's called prism violet. Is no longer white, it's no longer the same balance. So I need to block in this balance. So this is the remains of the green that I used for up here. On the brush that I was just putting in. Now that green follows through here, doesn't it? We've got all these lovely ferns in the wall. Quite a bright green. Now, you can see all the way back to the maple walk on the other side of the river, but the grass back there is colder. So I'm just going to paint that in over there. It's a little bit bright on my brush, So if I squiggle it in to get some of that grey colour off this part of the brush, that'll dull it down a bit. And maybe just a little bit of bluey grey to just really get it to settle in. See how adding the bit of blue grey just pushes it into the distance. Now there's a bit of a red bush back there. Well, it's not a red bush, it's a maple tree. But it's in the distance, it looks kind of the size of a bush. Alizarin crimson and prism violet. Now we will put some brighter onto that in a minute, so that's a bit of cadmium going in with it. Now you remember this is the block in. So what I'm doing is I'm establishing everything in its space, and then I will stand back and look at it, make sure that everything is in its right space before I go on to do the next stage, which might be after we have a cup of tea or coffee. Very quick break. That's a little bit of ochre on top of it. And then of course we're going to have all the lovely autumn leaves coming through here. Obviously those are too strong, but it is good to get a little bit of a feel of the colour coming round. Now, we're going to do a little bit more on this bush. So now I've got the tones around it. Do you see how that enables me to put in a little bit more detail? So this is ochre, sorry, it's raw sienna. It's a little greener than the ochre, in with the orange, cadmium orange. And I'm going to have a bit of cadmium, lemon yellow and cadmium yellow. Okay, now we've started to block in through here, but we haven't done this piece yet. So the water actually has another area of considerable change of tone. So this is ochre with white and a bit of the bluey grey. And you see, this is where the water comes down from the mountain, gets all churned over. And it makes quite a specific pattern. Do you see where it comes over here? It especially turns over here. Makes a light bit along the top and falls into a swirling pattern that makes a triangle. That's getting a little bit green. So when I've cleaned my brush, I'll go back with blue. But that's the idea of it. Now then, we've got an awful lot of light on the brushes, which I'm going to have to clean off in a second, because we're going to have to go to some dark colours. I'm going to get some darker greens in. So I'm just by blocks instead of line, building up the shape of the wall there. Really, if I'd had the time, I would have drawn it very carefully. Now I'm just going to put in, I've got to clean these brushes because they're getting very gummy. I'm going to put in the lovely red flowers that come across here. And giving the bushes just a little bit more foliage than they have right now, because again, they did have more foliage. And they make a nice filigree of light dancing on the green and the dark shadows to take away from the harsh line of the lead-in. So we didn't talk about lead-ins. Do you see that I have a double diagonal lead-in? So a diagonal lead-in is a line that leads your eye into the picture. A double diagonal lead-in is a lead-in that goes both ways. So we have this one that goes this way, we have this one that goes this way. You have to be very careful with that because you don't want the picture to divide. So one must be more dominant than the other, and there must be a strong pull that brings you back into the picture. Otherwise you end up heading out of the picture. And I'm going to have, as I said, the heron flying up the river too. So this is olive green. Olive green is great for mossy walls in the shadow. Okay, Donovan, I don't know if I'll be able to hear you, but I don't know how we're doing on time. My brushes are all gummy. It would be really good if I had a chance to clean them. So I wonder if we do a 10-minute or a 5 or 10-minute break. I don't mind which. I just need to clean my brushes. 5 minutes would be fine. People can get a cup of coffee for 5 minutes. So you come and tell me when that's convenient. It's just the paint's going to dry on them and they're going to take quite a bit of cleaning. So in the meantime, I'm putting, see there's a lovely daisy here. I gather it's a very rare daisy. We have it also by our gate actually. 321. Okay, so I've gone, okay. So let's do a 5-minute break. You tell me as soon. I just got to clean up my brushes. Donovan, a 5-minute break. 5 minutes? 10 minutes. Okay, 10-minute break. 10-minute break, and I just get cleaned up, and we'll be ready then to do the next stage, the third stage in the painting. So I'll keep painting until Donovan tells me to stop, because I'm not sure when he's turning off. The problem, we have it all fixed up so that he can talk to me. The problem is that the weir is so noisy that I can't really hear him very well. So I'm just still blocking in. I'm blocking in now the red flowers. So as I do that, I make a pattern. You see the pattern that comes across the picture.
Oh, okay.
Are we stopped?
I think you're done.
Are we? Okay. Good. Welcome back. Wow, that was a quick coffee break. Now, there is a good reason for me taking a break to remind you that when you're working on the site, it's very easy to get very involved in what you're doing. There's many an artist that has gotten too involved with their work on the site and ended up getting a chill and suffering from it. So I hadn't realized that I was getting cold because I was too busy engaged with this, so I'm quite distinctly chilled. So there's another layer or two on now, but that's fine. No worries, I'll get warm enough again while I'm working. Now, so we've covered over most of the canvas now. There are some smaller shapes that I'm going to put in, but really what we do at this stage is we make the picture become three-dimensional. We make it become round, not only in light on one side of the tree and dark on the other side, so that it becomes something that you could pick up, but also three-dimensional in depth, so that this tree here stands forward from the trees on the other side of the bank, so that you feel this space of air. Now, blue is a very good color for doing that, but you also want to have good tones. So as I go through this next stage, I'm going to obviously work with smaller and smaller shapes, but also more and more refined tone, which means that I'll be mixing a little bit more precisely. So you'll want to follow the brush a bit more, because it's not just big blobs of paint going on, it's a question of refining what I have. So the guts of everything is there. If there was anything that I didn't like, if there were any shapes that I felt were in the wrong space, or too big or too small, or the wrong color or the wrong tone, then now is the time to change them. I'm not feeling any of that, so I'm quite happy to keep going, except that standing back, I thought, do you know what? It works the way it is. There isn't anything of significance in putting that house in there. The house is disappearing, and that's the way it was 15 years ago. We have, I think, first of all, to get the light coming across and over the weir here, because I know that's something that lots of people will be very interested in, painting moving water. So it's simple, really. You just get the right tone, the right color. So we want it to go away from us. We don't want it to come towards us. So I'm going to use the blue, that is the colder blue, which is Menestial blue. It's not a bright blue. And I would start by building up the less obvious tones before I put on the final flicks of light. The final flicks of light are terribly juicy and exciting, but they won't mean much without having the supporting crew. So here we have a half tone of bluey light, and the water over the weir. Now you remember, it comes down here and it flows around the round bit, and down it comes. There's an extra little stone there. It's not just a one-size-fits-all weir, it's an individual weir. It's the weir that we have here in Ashford, with the right shape and the right way that the water flows over it. Now, where I have, because I'm working on the site, where I have bits of pink that get in with it, I'm just not going to, that can be sorted out in the studio at a later date. Not to mention with my tissue, which is about to be deployed. Good old tissue. So just working a few tones of blue through the bubbling, foaming froth. And you see there's a distinctive pattern to the way the water flows out to join the rest of the river. Now, where the water isn't quite as I want it to be, just a little damp tissue and lightly lift. And that actually gives me a half tone in itself. Okay, now we could take a few of these strokes of Monestio blue and white across through here so that we get a further ripple going back, and I don't mind actually if we have a little bit of the purpley colour. Now normally the paint would dry as you're working and it would skip over the surface a little more easily, but because there's so much moisture in this autumn air, it's not really doing that. But it doesn't matter because this is not a finished picture. This is what I'm doing in order to gain insight to the site, in order to be able to take home to my studio a working sketch, oil paint, colour, and be able to build out from this to the finished painting. So I use the acrylics because they're extremely well suited, so I would very often use them. But the acrylic colours are a little bit harsh and the tones are a little bit flat in nature. The oil paint will absolutely give you greater depth of tone and greater richness of colour. So I use the two of them, but you know, the acrylics can give you a nice effect too, so whatever suits. You know, some people like the rather flat clarity of the acrylics. It's a matter of taste, isn't it? It's all a matter of taste. As is how much detail you're going to put in now at this stage. So how much of this frothing, rolling, bubbling water and how much of the details, the leaves on the trees. Now, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself here, and you can see I could get totally carried away with this weir. So I guess I better not get totally carried away with the weir. We'll just put the turnover here in light, and then I'd better work on with my poor little trees that really need a bit more structure before I go away from here, because this that I'm doing with the weir is something you can do from a photograph. This now is detail that I'm doing. So I should stop. Okay, what I absolutely have to do is to get some of the branches going through the background, and because I want a rhythm of line going through the background, I'll try it with this brush just to save having to clean it thoroughly and get another brush, but it's a slightly big brush for doing that. We might get away with it if I'm lucky, and if not, we'll go to a smaller brush. Okay, so I'm going to use, I'm going to mix it with a knife to try to stop the brush from getting too heavy with paint, and burnt sienna. I just want dark browns really, so burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson. You see how I'm making a range of that with grey as I go across. And each tree is going to have a slightly different colour. So this tree, the main tree is going to be quite distinctly mauvey, isn't it? This one here, do you remember that I put the big branches in on? Because that's the character of the tree. And he's a big, thick tree. Now the tree that's behind is a little thinner, and it has lighter branches. Sorry, the flies are starting to come out now. Oh, that's another hazard of painting on the site. You may get flies stuck into your paint. Just leave them there. I don't worry about them. And when the paint is dry, they'll lift out quite easily. So while I've got the same colour on the brush, I'm going to go for all the trees which are more or less that colour. So this one over at the side is slightly more ochre mauve. So it doesn't really matter whether you make your brushes horizontal or vertical, whatever suits you. So now what we're doing is making a rhythm with line. So the final stage, which we're not really at yet, but I'm going to tell you about it because we may not get to the final stage today, 2 hours being rather a quick little glimpse into landscape painting. But the final step, we painting together with line. You'll see as we work, this rhythm of line is going to be very important to make a symphony in the background rather than individual trees just sitting there. So this tree is slightly more mauve. I hope Donovan's scene cameras are conveying all of that to you. Now the tree at the back is really more of a silhouette. So this is blue and brown, just dull. Because it's really just a silhouette. Now obviously I'm not putting in all the branches, both because of time, but also because I'm picking selectively those that I feel embody what I want to convey in the picture. So this is more blue. Making sure that he's rooted into the right place and right piece of the land. And then this one back here, the one that cuts through the house that we're not putting in. Again, there'll be more half-tones of trees back there, but I can put a little bit more in now. But I'm anxious to get onto these because I know our time is going. And that's the other difference between what we're doing with painting the scene and what you would do with a camera in photographing it. We can selectively pick those bits of the foliage that excite us, and the bits that, no, you know, don't do a lot for us, well, we don't have to put them in. So that extra bush that I drew in there, I don't think I'm going to put it in there. Sorry, Sean, he's the head gardener. He might like that bush very much, but from this point of view, it's not adding a lot to my picture. So I think I'll just have this tree in its full beauty. Don't want to overcomplicate it either. Now then, just as we have the red coming through here, we want to get a bit of red coming up onto the thing here. So I took a bit of green as well as the red, because obviously there's green foliage supporting the red berries. When people paint, when my students paint flowers or trees or bushes, very often there's a forgetting, there's so much excitement about the berry or the flower or whatever is so particularly attractive about it, that there's a tendency to forget the supporting cast, a tendency to forget the foliage that supports that delightful show of red or orange. And it's needed, apart from the fact that it's there in nature. If I just have a big solid blob of red, it's much less effective than having green complementary colours, so they light one another to the eye and stop the amount of red from being overwhelming, but make the red that's there really nourishing, really satisfying. In the dark. Now, do you see, as I'm putting them on, I'm also putting them on not just as blobs, well, they are blobs, but they're blobs that are arranged in a particular way. They're blobs that are arranged as I'm seeing them, draped on. And just allowing a little bit of them to reflect down into the water. Now, there's an advantage to the water being a little wet. Now, as we come along here, the greenery changes and it becomes more of a yellow green, although there's still some cold green in with it. So I've just seen that I had on the brush, and I'm picking shapes that I see there without being a slave to having every single shape that I see included. So I'm picking shapes that are characteristic of what I'm seeing without worrying that they are including every single one of those leaves. I'm taking little tips of lemon yellow and cadmium yellow, where the leaves would just catch on the light that I remember. Now I'm going over to more cadmium yellow for the leaves that are turning, that I can see, that are turning yellow. as I make these patterns, I'm very aware of the spaces in between. So the spaces in between these pieces of foliage we would call negative spaces. They're the spaces of space, of nothing happening. And they interlock and hold the spaces of positive shape, pure shape, of objects, of solid things that you would go over and pick up. Now I've added some ochre in with that for these big leaved things over here. Yes, if we do this again, I think I really either have to look up what the flowers are or have somebody tell you what they are, because it's an awful shame that I don't. I just appreciate how they look. My cousin comes over from Holland to specially study the trees here, so I'll have to get her on the job. So now I'm going back into the foliage there, picking out a few bits. I will bring some of the reds through as the browns of the ferns and the pinky browns of the dried whatever there is back there. But before I do that, I have this big shape over here that needs more attention. Here I am doing little shapes. These big shapes, they need to be looked after. So first of all, I'm going to put some structure through the bush so that we have a framework upon which the foliage sits, so it's like a hand that holds it. So we already have the colour pretty much mixed up. This browny ochre grey that we had mixed, and I'm just adding a bit more purple through it to make some darker lines. And we'll get the structure of the branches flowing through it. And this is a bit of brine in with the purple. There's a bit of ochre there as well, because I'm mixing it on a yellowy green bit. As you see, the branches vary in colour. And yes, it does matter what the shape is, because each bush, as any botanist will know, each bush has a particular shape to its branches. So I have to make sure that what I have is characteristic of this particular shrub. I used to play a game with my mother on the long journey to Connemara and back as we were driving along to see if we could identify the trees just from the shapes of the trunks and the crowns, because you wouldn't see more than that as you were driving. But they all have their own character. But each species has some similarity. Now, really I should get a finer brush, and when I finish this I will get a finer brush. But in the meantime, I'm getting that character. Because those silhouettes there against the sky are rather nice, even though they need to be slightly finer. While I'm there, and there'll be a few lighter ones, but while I'm there, I should put in the gate. So that's purple, that's blue and alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson. And where does the gate come here? And this is the path the other side by the pond. And that's the support of the gate. Now, if you're not sure how to do the gate, if your spacing isn't very good, what you do is you start with top and bottom, and then you put a middle divider in, and then divide that in two, and divide that in two. And there you have your gate. Now, actually, because I've got that support there, it's a distraction having the second support, so I'm removing it. See how easy it is to remove it? And in fact, I mislooked, and there's horizontal here and another horizontal here, presumably to let the dog underneath or something, not one at the bottom. Okay, and stronger support in here. Now, actually, that probably means I need to bring my grass out a bit. So let's do that. You can see the colours I'm mixing, lemon and ochre and sap green. Bit more lemon and ochre. Just as it comes towards us. Do you see how that little bit of warmth just makes the grass more real as it comes towards us? Now, as I've done that, do you see how much flatter this bit is looking? So as you start working, you find that you have to keep working around to keep up. But before I go on to that, I do want to do a bit more with the foliage here. So now that we're making the painting three-dimensional, we're using chiaroscuro, and we're putting the light in as it catches onto the side of this bush, shrub. And that's the wonderful thing about the autumn. There's such variety in the colours of the leaves. But you see that with each particular tree, it's like it's a family of colours. The colours all relate to one another. You can't just go dab, 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 dab all around the picture, or you end up with it all looking the same, and you don't get the same depth and the same movement. So as I'm doing this, I'm aware of keeping that movement, both of shape and of colour, going through all of the picture. And we'll look at that in a moment when I'm not busy doing this. Now this live stream will be available as a recording continuously through our website, which is irishschooloflandscapepainting.com. Irish, ISOLP, to make it short if it's easier for you, ISOLP. So you can just go there and access the recording whenever you like, plus recordings that we've done on our own property, which is just half a mile upstream that way. Woodland, both in oil. We did that in the Bluebell Town. We've done them during the lockdowns. So we did the first one in May when all the bluebells started coming out, and I thought, oh gosh, not everybody can see this, so we did the live stream. And then again in April from down by the river on our property. And then there's a few from the class as well. There's watercolors, and there's oils, there's portraits, there's landscape, there's mixed media, there's lots of different things there, all little free snippets or full demonstrations like this. Now, I'm just going to pick out a few of the individual stones, because the shapes of the stones are rather nice. So I'm going to pick them out in blocks first, and then we'll do as I was doing in the background and tie the front also together with line. So you see how at all times you're working the whole picture together hand in hand. So the whole time you're balancing every bit one with another. It's not static. So these are little stones that there are in the driveway here. Little loose bits of stone on the gravel. How are we doing on time, Donovan?
It is 4:06.
Oh, good. Oh, it's so we're 4:06. But can we go on?
6 minutes over, but everything's running fine.
Okay.
Can go over
So
again.
I'm very happy to keep going for until 4:30 when the light will really go. And if you want to keep listening, do so. If you want to go look at the website to see more finished work, then also do so. irishschooloflandscapepainting.com. So as you like, I'm here and happy to keep going. The tone and the colour very slightly, so this is a little bit more blue. You see from the same, do you see why I use these plates? These are just old dinner plates, and I find them much easier than those palettes with little individual places for mixing the paint, because I run one colour into another colour, and it works. Oh, you're putting more lights on. Donovan's so brilliant. He even brought lights. He'll have me working here until it's moonlight, except we'll run out of power. And so then that's down to the darker, more purple colour. Okay, I hope it's making sense to you all. You are welcome to write in if you want to ask a question. I think we'll just have a bit of the wall peeking out here so that we see that the wall continues on. Can you move that back a little bit, Donovan? It's in the corner of my eye.
Okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Oh, that's much better, Donovan. I can see much better. It's funny, you can end up painting really almost until it's dark, because you're sort of so involved with the picture that you do notice that it's getting dark, but you sort of, I guess your eyes adjust with the painting. I didn't realise that it had gotten that dark. So that's a little purple that's gone in with the colour that I was using there, a little purple green. But you see, it works well for in the shadow of the shrub there. Okay, now we've got some light through it. Now we need to bring some dark through it. So I will take another big old brush, and we'll just take a little bit of olive green, sap green, a bit of hooker's green, or this is emerald green, just to get a little bit more change of tone here. Some smaller shapes. So as I'm going smaller and smaller strokes, now I'm going to put so as the strokes get smaller, so I'm changing the tone a bit more. tone and color. So a little bit of orange and ochre coming in. Oh, that's raw sienna rather than ochre, actually. Oops, that's a little exaggerated, but okay. Now again, if I were doing this for myself, I would certainly be standing back at this point in time. Why do we stand back? It's to enable you to get the big picture, to not get too caught up in the detail. Because it's easy when you're doing little pretty bits of fern coming through, the red flower with daisies as well. It's very easy to get so involved in that one little pretty bit that you forget about the balance with the whole. And the secret to landscape painting is really to keep that balance, to keep that feeling of the spirit of the place where you are, rather than just the detail of the little flower study that you happen to be painting at that moment. Now, do you see how flat that's starting to look? The more that you work up one area, the more the next area needs working up. And you see the little tree over there, little bush, and it catches quite a lot of yellow in its leaves as it's starting to turn before they drop. And it's nice to get a little hint of the moss on the stones here, because it's so characteristic of the place. So you see, I'm trying to get the character of that plant, quite different to this plant. And the cold is starting to get through even this fleece, but I have another fleece. So you really do need, when you're out on the site, to bring layers to put on as the day goes by. Now, there's a bit more red or reddish brown going in here, and you see how making that bit of depth there pushes that gate further away from me, gives me the feeling of being able to walk up the path. And then we can carry it through a little lighter with orangey, purpley, ochre-y, yellowy, different bits of fallen leaves. And we've got the wall as well. Mustn't forget the wall. Here's my wall colour. So you see I've got 3 brushes now, all with different colours on them, so that I can swap from one to another quite easily. Don't forget the white in with the colour, which gives some tone. There's some very light yellow leaves there, terribly strong in colour, but they're bright in tone. Even on the grass here, we have the same thing going on. the leaves don't choose where they fall. They go everywhere. Now we've put the detail of the leaves, so we want a bit of detail for the grass as well. So you put in a few different tones for the grass. Again, getting slightly darker towards the edge helps to hold the eye in. Okay, and that brings us back round to where we were doing the daisies earlier. And you see now they're looking a little bit plain and flat. So let's get a little bit of the texture of the mossy wall in behind. So that they can sing out there. Okay, now that's coming on. Do you see how flat it's starting to look in the background? So let's go back in there now with the pinky green, the slightly pinky green. So I'm going to put out a little bit of pink just to save on time. Just to save me time. Because it doesn't want to be a bright pink. So we're getting very close now to wrapping up. So last chance really for questions. Now, do you see the subtlety of the tone now back there? There's a lot of different colours coming off on the brush. It's basically this pink colour with on the same brush that had the greens on them. And you see how it just gives a little bit of distance. Now where it goes over the tree, no worries, you can still just rub it off. Now we can do a little bit more detail along here. We've got a lot of other flowers which are along here that we didn't put in until we'd established the ones in the front. So back around we go to these. I don't know how Donovan's doing with his power, but I know he was concerned that that he would have enough power. He hasn't told me he's running out, so I'm sure it's all right. But if you did lose me, you know where to find me again on the website, irishschooloflandscapepainting.com. He's got an assortment of car batteries and a car running and UPSs and all sorts of things. So we should be all right, I hope. So just a little bit of extra green at the bottom of the wall. And you see how it sinks, see how that gives space before the weir now. Now we can catch a little bit of light on the top of the wall, and it gives a little bit of crispness and a little catch of light, which then moves through the picture. Okay, now we can do some actual modelling so that we get a light side and a dark side to the trees back here. So there's some dark going in. But you see how much rounder that makes it feel. Here underneath this bunch of trees, another bit of dark. Of course, at this time of day, the shadows are getting a bit exaggerated in reality. So you've got to keep in mind what it would be in the light that we're painting. Okay, now we got back to our big tree here, and it would be very nice to get some of the structure of that tree in, which is distinctly different to the one in front. And it's a much more purpley colour. Oh, there's another fish. Okay, it really is starting to get dark now because I've got cast shadows from my from the lights. So I guess we're nearly at time to finish. I'll just put in a little bit more on this tree. And we're going to just boost up the colour a little bit, same as we did here. So orange and ochre and cadmium yellow. And of course, as the light goes, you would want to be careful with what colour you put on, because as we spoke about it earlier with regard to tone, you can see tone in the dark, but colour you need light for. So we talked about how you move your eye through the composition. This is the most important thing of painting a picture. So we began by, I can see the colour really is going, isn't it? Okay, so it's time to wrap up. So we began with establishing just lines, just geometric shapes. And the geometric shapes were such that it moved your eye through the picture. We began by putting in just the main lines, just the main trees. I think it was these two trees, and the river, and the weir, and the path, and the tree. And from that we built to the smaller and smaller shapes, all the time keeping your eye moving around the picture. And you see the picture is very simple, although it may look complex. We've got a triangle here, we've got a bigger triangle here, we've got a big rectangle here divided across, so it makes another triangle. These two triangles leave a rectangle here. Above, yes? A question? Okay, I'll let Matthew walk here so I can hear the question, and I'm just going to continue with this little bit and then answer the question. Okay, we've got another big rectangle up here. This rectangle is much bigger than that rectangle. Then we've got a series of rectangles through here, and these are quite important rectangles, and it's important that they're different sizes. You see they're nearly the same, but they are different sizes. So you've got three different sized rectangles here, this rectangle and that rectangle, 5 big rectangles. You've got your triangles, and you've got then minor triangles in amongst the trees. You remember I kept angling the trees to make triangles. Another horizontal triangle there to balance all the vertical triangles. Then in amongst those we've got circles. They're not complete circles, they're bits of circles. So here we have a circle, here we have a circle, and they're divided into smaller circles. The negative space here it's not a straight line here. I made it so that these red bushes come up, so they're a circle that holds the composition, like holding it in your hand. So everything interconnects and interweaves one with another, but they are basically very simple shapes, and if you put them down in the order that I showed you, it's very, very important that you do our steps in exactly the order they're shown, because if you skip ahead, it's like juggling with one orange. It's quite easy, and by the time you've got 4 oranges, you'll be dropping all of them, not even catching one. So start with the simple bits, work on, and then you can get quite complicated. So now we've got all sorts of little shapes going on in here, Same thing happens with the tones. The tones are simple blocks of tone, and the tones lead your eye through the picture, as do the colours. You see, the orange brings you up and around into the yellow and back around again. The reds bring you around. The blues bring you through the picture. It all weaves together. So the final stage is the interweaving of the linear part of it, the drawing the line. Okay, that was important to say.
The question, what are the diagonal leadings?
So the
What are diagonal?
So diagonal lead-ins, very good question. So can you see this very dominant line in the picture? So you can either see it as the line of the wall, or you can see it as the line of the path, whichever line you wish to look at. But it's a very strong line, and the reason it's called a lead-in is because it leads you along the path and through the gate there and into the picture. And then it's taken up by this diagonal. You see this line here is an important line because it takes your eye immediately then up to here where you explore the middle of the picture where the house was going to be, but we decided not to include a house. And then down this side, and then the second diagonal lead-in is this one, strong line of the weir. So that could also be a diagonal lead-in, but because it's smaller, see it's short, and this one here is 3 times as long, it's called a secondary diagonal lead-in. So it creates a pull, a tension in your work, which can be quite exciting. It can also be difficult to handle, so you have to have strong shapes that pull your eye back in. So that's a diagonal lead-in, so is that, but this is the main one because it's primary. Hope that answers the question. Write in if not. Okay, I can see that the light is really going because my paint is shining in the light. I'll give a couple of minutes for any last questions, and I'm just going to continue to put in a little bit more tone. I'm going to work into here now, which is the area that we've most neglected. And there's a lot of very dark tone in there. So do you see, even just putting a few bits of dark there, do you see how that, again, it's like a hand holding it. I'm putting a bit of green in there, as well as the purple. Which can reflect down into the water. What's that? No more questions, but lots of thanks. You're very, very welcome. If you like to write somewhere, Donovan will know how to get your names and addresses that we can notify you the next time we're doing something. I don't know, I'm not a technical person. However you wish to contact us, if you want to know next time we're locked down and we're doing one of these, we'll send out to you. If not, just keep an eye on the Irish School of Landscape Painting website because we'll always post it there. So thank you for watching and being patient as this proceeds, and hope to see you again.